The mahogany conference table gleamed under the soft lighting of Harrison and Associates' main boardroom. 14 pairs of eyes stared at me with varying degrees of disdain as Richard Harrison, my father-in-law and managing partner, delivered the news I'd been expecting for weeks. "Alexandra," he said, adjusting his Hermes tie with practiced precision, "your performance has become a liability to this firm. The Morgan case was the final straw. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. I'm Alexandra Chen Harrison, formerly a senior associate at Philadelphia's most prestigious corporate law firm, and I'd just been fired by my father-in-law while my husband, James Harrison, sat silently at his right hand." "The Morgan case?" I kept my voice steady. "The one where I discovered irregular payments to offshore accounts." Richard's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "The case you nearly lost due to your overzealous investigation methods." The client was quite displeased. Of course they were displeased. People engaging in massive tax fraud usually don't appreciate thorough audits. "I see." I gathered my papers slowly, methodically. "And the Douglas Holdings audit? That file has been reassigned." James finally spoke, not quite meeting my eyes. "The client requested someone with more experience. Someone more willing to overlook discrepancies," he meant. In 6 years at Harrison and Associates, I'd built a reputation for detail, something that had once been praised but had recently become problematic. "Very well." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "I assume HR has my paperwork ready?" Richard nodded to his secretary. "Martha will handle everything, and Alexandra." His steel gray eyes met mine. "I trust to remember your confidentiality obligations." The threat was clear. I'd signed ironclad NDAs when joining the firm. Any attempt to expose what I'd found would result in immediate legal action. "Of course." I smiled slightly. "I remember everything I sign." I walked out with my head high, past the whispers and stares. My office had already been packed up. They'd known how this meeting would end before it began. The guard escorted me to the lobby, where Martha waited with termination papers. As I signed them, my phone buzzed. A text from James. "Dinner at Dad's tonight. We need to talk." 6 hours later, I sat in Richard Harrison's palatial dining room, picking at an overpriced steak while my mother-in-law, Patricia, prattled on about our latest charity gala. "It's really for the best, dear," she said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Law firms can be subdemanding. Now you can focus on starting a family." I took a sip of wine to hide my expression. Patricia had been pushing for grandchildren since the wedding, convinced that my career was the only thing standing in the way. "Mother," James warned softly. "Well, it's true." She gestured expansively with her wine glass. "Alexandra's been working far too hard, getting involved in things that don't concern her." "Like fraud?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went silent. Richard set down his fork with a soft clink. "Careful, Alexandra," he said quietly. "Unfounded accusations can be dangerous." "Unfounded." I laughed. "Like the $10 million missing from the Morgan accounts, or the phantom subsidiaries in the Douglas Holdings structure." James gripped my arm under the table. "Alex, stop." I pulled away from him. "No, James. I don't think I will." I turned to Richard. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't keep records?" "Records?" Richard's voice was dangerously soft. "Of what exactly?" "Everything." I stood up. "Every irregular transfer, every suspicious shell company, every client meeting that somehow didn't make it into the official files." Patricia gasped. "Richard, she's threatening you." "No," I corrected. "I'm leaving. Thank you for dinner." James followed me out to the driveway. "Alex, wait. You're upset, I understand, but—" "Do you?" I turned to face him. "Do you understand that your father is helping clients commit massive fraud? That the firm we both swore to uphold the law for is actively breaking it? It's more complicated than that." "No, it's not." I searched his face, looking for any sign of the ethical lawyer I'd married. "When did you know?" He looked away. "Alex." "When?" 2 years ago," he admitted. "After the Peterson case. Dad said it was just creative accounting. That everyone does it. And you believed him." "He's my father. And I'm your wife." The words echoed in the quiet street. "I came to you first, James. 3 months ago, when I found the first discrepancies, you told me I was overreacting. I was trying to protect you." "No." I stepped back. You were protecting him, just like always. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. I'd known this confrontation was coming ever since I'd discovered the first suspicious transfer in the Morgan accounts. What the Harrisons didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 months preparing. In my home office, I unlocked the hidden safe behind my law school diploma, the one James had insisted was unnecessary. Inside was everything I collected: transaction records, shell company documentation, emails, meeting notes. Enough evidence to bring down one of Philadelphia's most powerful law firms. My phone buzzed again. James. Please don't do anything rash, his text read. Dad's willing to be generous with the severance if you're reasonable. I thought about the USB drive hidden in my grandmother's old locket, the one I always wore. About the encrypted files stored on secure servers. About the detailed records I'd sent to my personal email account using a private VPN. I'm always reasonable, I texted back. Then I called the one person I knew I could trust. Sarah? It's Alex. Remember that conversation we had about the SEC whistleblower program? I think it's time. Sarah Chen had been my roommate in law school before joining the Securities and Exchange Commission. She'd been the first person I contacted when I found the suspicious patterns. Are you sure? She asked now. Once we start this process. I'm sure. I looked at the wall of photos. My wedding day, family gatherings at the Harrison estate, holiday parties at the firm. All lies. They gave me no choice. Come to my office first thing Monday, she said. And Alex, be careful. Men like Richard Harrison don't go down easily. I know. I touched the locket containing the USB drive. That's why I made copies of everything. The weekend passed in tense silence. James came home late on Saturday, tried to convince me to be reasonable and accept a generous severance package. When I refused, he packed a bag and went to his parents' house. On Sunday, I received 3 calls from different partners at the firm, each offering increasingly large settlements in exchange for my discretion. I didn't answer any of them. By Monday morning, my evidence was organized and ready. I dressed carefully in my best suit, Chanel, a gift from Patricia for my first day at the firm. Ironic. As I drove to the SEC office, I noticed a black SUV following me. Amateur move. Richard should have known better than to have me tailed so obviously. Sarah was waiting in the lobby with 2 FBI agents. Mrs. Chen Harrison, one of them said, we're very interested in what you have to tell us. Well, I smiled, touching my grandmother's locket. I have quite a story for you. I spent the next 4 hours laying out everything I'd found. The offshore accounts, the phantom subsidiaries, the falsified audits, over $100 million in client money, hidden and manipulated through a complex web of fraud. This is comprehensive, Agent Roberts said, reviewing my documentation. You've done our job for us. I'm thorough, I replied. It's why they fired me. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Texts from James, calls from Richard, emails from the firm's other partners. I ignored them all. Until one text caught my eye. From Patricia. You have no idea what you're doing. Richard has friends in high places. I showed it to Agent Roberts. Is that a threat? He asked. Knowing my father-in-law? Yes. We can offer you protection. No need. I pulled out one final file. The file contained details of Richard's personal accounts, including records of his own offshore holdings. Money that hadn't come from his legitimate law practice. How did you get this? Sarah asked. Let's just say Richard isn't the only one with friends in high places. I smiled, remembering the private investigator who'd owed me a favor after I'd saved his daughter from a DUI charge. And unlike some people, I believe in keeping detailed records. By noon, the FBI had enough to move. Teams were mobilized, warrants prepared. Soon, Harrison and Associates would be getting some unexpected visitors. I stood at Sarah's office window, watching Philadelphia's skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard Harrison was probably sitting in his corner office, believing he was still in control. That his power and connections would protect him, just as they always had. He was wrong. I touched my locket one last time, thinking of all the evidence it contained. Evidence that would expose not just the firm's fraud, but the entire network of corruption Richard had built over decades. Ready? Sarah asked. I nodded, picking up my briefcase. Time to show them what overzealous investigation methods can really do. The real storm was about to begin. and I have front row seats to watch the mighty Harrison empire crumble. They thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it had set me free. The FBI raid on Harrison and Associates began precisely at 2:15 p.m. I watched from Sarah's office as dark vehicles surrounded the building. Within minutes, agents were streaming through the prestigious glass doors my father-in-law had installed just last year. Doors that had cost more than most people's cars. My phone rang. "James, what have you done?" His voice shook with rage or fear, possibly both. "What you should have done 2 years ago," I replied calmly. "The right thing. They're arresting Dad." "Good. Alex, please." His voice softened. "There's still time. If you withdraw your statement." "Withdraw what?" I cut in. "The evidence of tax fraud, the proof of money laundering, the records showing how your father helped criminals hide their assets." "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." I watched another team of agents enter the building. "It's exactly that simple. The law is the law, James. Or did you forget that when you took your oath?" He was quiet for a moment. "They'll destroy you for this." "No," I said softly. "They won't." Because what none of them knew yet was that I hadn't just collected evidence of their crimes. I'd built an entire case, complete with a timeline of how the corruption had spread through the firm like a cancer. My phone buzzed with breaking news alerts. The story was hitting the media. FBI raids prestigious law firm. Harrison and Associates under federal investigation. Senior partner arrested in massive fraud case. Then came the text from Patricia. "You've destroyed this family." I thought about all the family dinners where they belittled my work ethic, my attention to detail, my insistence on doing things by the book. About how they tried to mold me into their image of a proper Harrison wife. Decorative. Compliant. Willing to look the other way. "No, Patricia," I typed back. "You destroyed it yourselves. I'm just exposing the rot." Sarah appeared at my door. "They found the hidden server room. The one you told us about." I nodded. Richard had maintained a separate server for his special clients, the ones whose activities needed extra discretion. He thought it was secure. He hadn't counted on his 8 manager owing me a favor after I'd helped his son with some legal troubles. "How many files?" "Thousands." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "The forensic team says it's a goldmine. Money laundering, tax evasion, evidence tampering. How long have you been gathering this?" "Since the Morgan case," I replied, "when I first spotted the irregular payments. But I didn't understand the full scope until the Douglas Holdings audit. That's when I realized it wasn't just creative accounting, it was systemic fraud." My phone buzzed again. A message from Martha, Richard's secretary. FBI asking about the Cayman accounts. What should I tell them? "The truth," I replied. "And Martha, remember those harassment complaints Richard buried last year? Now might be a good time to mention those too." By evening, the scope of the scandal was becoming clear. 7 partners arrested, dozens of clients implicated, hundreds of millions in fraudulent transactions exposed. I sat in a federal conference room, watching the news coverage. Richard's face filled the screen as agents led him out in handcuffs. His perfect composure finally cracked. James burst in, flanked by 2 agents. "Happy now?" he snarled. "You've ruined everything." "No, James, your father ruined everything. He turned a respected law firm into a criminal enterprise. He corrupted everyone around him, including you. I was protecting our family. By helping criminals hide their money? By looking the other way while your father broke every ethical rule we swore to uphold. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stood up, facing him. "You chose power over principles, money over morality, your father's approval over your own integrity. And what about loyalty?" he demanded. "What about marriage vows?" "My vows didn't include becoming an accessory to fraud." I removed my wedding ring, placed it on the table. "I'm filing for divorce. My new firm will be in touch." "New firm?" "The SEC's Anti-Corruption Task Force." I smiled at his shocked expression. "They offered me a position. Apparently, they appreciate thorough investigation methods." He staggered slightly. "You planned this?" "No. You all planned this the moment you decided laws were for other people. I just decided not to go down with you." After he left, Sarah brought me coffee. "You okay?" I looked at my bare ring finger. "I will be." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The investigation expanded as more evidence emerged. Client after client was implicated. The firm's reputation, built over 3 generations, crumbled in days. Patricia tried to save face by throwing a charity gala. Nobody came. The other partners' wives, who had once snubbed me at country club events, now called begging for information about their husband's involvement. I ignored them all, focusing on building cases with the SEC team. My detailed records proved invaluable, helping prosecutors untangle the complex web of fraud. 1 month after the raid, I received a letter from prison. From Richard. Alexandra. You've won. The firm is destroyed. The Harrison name is ruined. I hope you're satisfied. But remember this. Power isn't just about money or connections. It's about knowing how to use them. You think you've beaten me, but you've only proven you're more like me than you know. Asterisk Richard. I showed the letter to Sarah. He's trying to get in your head, she said. Make you doubt yourself. I know. I pinned the letter to my new office wall. But he's wrong. This isn't about power. It's about justice. 6 months later, I stood in court watching Richard's sentencing. 20 years for fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The judge was particularly harsh, noting how he corrupted his position as a lawyer to facilitate crime. James got 5 years for his role, though he turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence. The other partners received various terms based on their involvement. Patricia filed for divorce, claiming she'd known nothing. The society pages that had once featured her charity work now documented her fall from grace. As I left the courthouse, a young lawyer stopped me. Ms. Chen. She looked nervous. I'm starting at a new firm next week. After everything that happened at Harrison and Associates, how do you know when to speak up? I thought about all the times I'd seen wrong things and said nothing. About the moment I finally decided enough was enough. Trust your instincts, I told her, and keep detailed records. That evening, I sat in my new office at the SEC, looking at a photo from my first day at Harrison and Associates. I'd been so proud, so eager to prove myself worthy of the prestigious Harrison name. Now I knew that true worth isn't about names or reputations. It's about doing what's right, even when, especially when, it costs you everything you thought you wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from Martha. Thank you. The harassment lawsuit was settled today. Richard can't hurt anyone else now. I smiled, touching my grandmother's locket, now empty of its USB drive but full of different kinds of strength. They thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it had given me a voice I never knew I had. They thought I was just a dutiful daughter-in-law who would look the other way. Instead, I became the whistleblower who brought down an empire of corruption. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in keeping secrets, but in exposing them.